I feel privileged being a photographer and being able to see scenes like this and record them because I feel like I'm seeing history. I like sitting on a corner and watching the world go by. I got what's called Marco Polo fever. I became obsessed. Everything Marco wrote or talked about. I'm going to retrace his steps. One of the most interesting pieces of the Zheng He puzzle is how he got from a rural farming village in Yunnan to become China's greatest seafaring explorer. The only way I can truly understand these great voyages is to make them myself.
Greetings from the shores of the Pacific Ocean. Our great seas and majestic oceans serve as the backdrop for the Age of Discovery, between the 1400s and 1600s, when naval explorers from European countries sailed, colonized, and conquered regions across the globe. Among the most famous names, Christopher Columbus, Vasco da Gama, Ferdinand Magellan, James Cook, and Henry Hudson. But some historians believe perhaps the greatest naval explorer came from the other side of the world, decades earlier than those others. One whose name many have never heard, Zheng He, a Navy admiral in the early 1400s when China ruled the seas, commander of the most powerful fleet of ships the world had ever seen until the 20th century. But Zheng He's rise and fall is a cautionary tale for all great powers. It is also an epic adventure along the maritime Silk Road, one captured like never before by acclaimed National Geographic photographer Michael Yamashita. His journey now, retracing Zheng He's Silk Road by sea, a journey we hope will change the way you see our world. This is the story of two global ambassadors from two different chapters in world history. Two figures united in their pursuit of new discoveries, exploring untouched frontiers, bridging east and west, and fostering peace and friendship through mutual understanding. From Asia, Zheng He, China's greatest naval explorer, commander of one of the largest naval fleets ever assembled by an empire. A leader on the brink of conquering the world in the early 1400s. And from America, Michael Yamashita, one of the world's most acclaimed photojournalists, National Geographic's master storyteller, and renowned expert on Asia. The only one who has ever retraced the epic journeys of two of the world's greatest explorers, Marco Polo from the west to Zheng He from the east. Historians have long been intrigued with Admiral Zheng He. He was, as Michael Yamashita describes, China's greatest explorer who you never heard of. Zheng He sailed 40,000 miles across the South China Seas and the Indian Ocean decades before Columbus and Vasco da Gama had made it to the coast of Africa.
I first read about Zheng He last year, I was totally intrigued. How is it that I had never heard of this guy before?
And for Michael Yamashita, the only way to truly understand these voyages was to make them himself. Across the China Sea, from Southeast Asia to Africa, and via India onto the Middle East. In this program, Michael Yamashita reveals the dramatic stories behind the stills. After capturing precious pictures of today and testimony of what happened 600 years ago. Zheng He embarked on a total of 7 voyages during the Great Ming Dynasty. And during these 3 decades on the oceans, Zheng He visited 30 countries, gathering riches beyond imagination, scientific knowledge, fame, and power for his emperor.
He's done it all. He's already been throughout the Indian Ocean, and he comes here looking for tributary trade. He wants basically to show the world his power, China's power as the greatest country of the world. And that's why, of course, he's traveling with 300 ships with 27,000 soldiers and these huge treasure ships of 400-foot length. It's a big show of power. He's not here to conquer. He's not here to occupy. He just wants to show the world we're the greatest.
But history also remembers Zheng He's epic voyages as a tragic story of China's rise and fall, a cautionary tale of arguably one of the worst foreign policy blunders ever made. China's decision to abandon Zheng He's expedition, to withdraw and isolate from the world, all of which led to China's long decline for centuries until recent modern history. Today, more than 6 centuries after Zheng He's first voyage, the forgotten admiral is getting his long-deserved recognition. As we uncover the great legacy that he bequeathed to the world, join us now as we embark on a new journey between past and present with Zheng He, tracing the epic voyages of China's greatest explorer with Michael Yamashita in his own words.
Africa, the Swahili coast. Legend among local people speaks of a strange event many years ago. It's a day that would change their lives forever. A ghostly assemblage clouded the horizon. Even the blazing sun surrendered to its might. But this was no cloud. It was a fleet of unimaginable size. Giant billowing sails of red silk tower over huge ships. Mysterious, pale-faced men in their thousands stride the decks in white robes, with treasure from a faraway world.
As I'm looking at this incredible blue-green water out there, I'm imagining how amazing it must have been to watch 300 ships coming in on the horizon. It must have been just an incredible sight.
Passed down from father to son, this story slowly faded back into the sea, till no one really knew how big the ships really were, where these strangers had come from, or even if they had ever been at all. Because as suddenly as they appeared that day, they vanished, evaporated into the timeless ocean. This was the great treasure fleet from China, the Dragon Throne, the biggest fleet assembled on the world's oceans until the 20th century. So why did it disappear? And Why was their great admiral virtually erased from the annals of history? 600 years later, National Geographic photographer Mike Yamashita sets off on his own epic journey. He'll search for traces of the fleet's 7 voyages as he follows the trail of its visionary commander, a towering eunuch admiral, his name Zheng He.
Zheng He, the great 15th century admiral, that the world's greatest explorer that nobody knows about. Not even the Chinese really spent a lot of time explaining or writing about this man. He was a non-Chinese, he was a Muslim, he was a probably from Eastern of Central European origin. And a eunuch to boot. So even in his hometown, the cover of this book shows this dilapidated painting of Zheng He. We thought this was a good place to start, considering if this is his hometown where this mural has been painted, and they've let it go in that much disrepair. Well, what can you say? A forgotten Chinese hero. But the difficulty in doing this story was the fact that all these boats that he sailed on don't exist. And there are very few sailboats now in general, anywhere in the South China Sea, let alone the Indian Ocean or off the coast of Africa. But this was one of them, and so I choose this picture, kind of a land-ho picture. I have this guy probably from Oman. I think this boat was built in Oman. This is an Arab dhow, and he's looking across at Lamu off the coast of Kenya. And it feels, for me, gives me the feeling of what it was like sailing on a boat in Zheng He's time. So I'll pull this as my first picture that I think is worth looking at.
We're arriving in Lamu, the biggest Arab dhow left in the Indian Ocean, just as Zheng He would have seen it from the deck of a 400-foot treasure ship. And it just looks beautiful. This is unbelievable. More than twice the size of one of Vasco da Gama's ships. This is an Arab dhow made out of 100% Malaysian teak and destined to be sailed over to the Middle East in the next couple of weeks. Just look at the size of that piece of wood they just brought aboard. It's probably the biggest wooden ship anyone's ever likely to see in the 21st century. Yet the great treasure ships were more than double this size.
I did quite a bit around China, of course, where he came from. And these fish traps around Xiamen were a favorite subject. It had beautiful light. The graphic compositions and the possibilities with all these lines and repeating patterns made this a very fun place to shoot. I spent a couple of days here. Nets, same thing. I wasn't looking for anything but a beautiful picture with a wonderful pattern. And the light was beautiful early morning.
And it was also an important subject because as Marco Polo, who actually preceded Zheng He by several hundred years, described these same nets and Chinese aquaculture well before the West had this kind of technology.
When Marco described this, it was pretty much the first time anybody ever described aquaculture, and that was 700 years ago. They raise the fish here in the lake and then take them on a regular basis, and he thought it was amazing that people had a full-time living as fishermen. So I guess fishermen in Venice would only go out on occasion or something. And for him, it was a big deal that these guys made a living just fishing.
Here's another picture that I like very much for the light. And I'm on the island of Mejo. And it's early morning again, and I have this very simple scene of fishermen carrying their catch from their boats to the market on land. And again, it's all about the light. Of course, the bonus of shooting Zheng He was the fact that I got to spend all this time on the water, because water is one of my favorite subjects. There's nothing like seeing the reflection and the colors that dance on top of water.
"27,000 men, 317 ships, giants of the ocean. Some 400 feet in length, under the masterly eye of its titanic leader."
Finally, I too am ready to set sail to discover the worlds that Zheng He and the treasure fleet explored 6 centuries before me. From the mouth of the Yangtze River, I head south, just as Zheng He and his crew did for the first time in the autumn of 1405.
Our goal is to reach the Malabar coast of India, the destination of all 7 voyages of the treasure fleets. Our guide, the journal of a 25-year-old translator, Ma Huan. It's the only remaining eyewitness account of the sights, sounds, and people along the routes of the fleet. As we pass the coast of Vietnam, Ma Huan's writings begin to come alive. Going southwest for 100 li, you come to the city where the king resides. Most of the men take up fishing for a livelihood. They seldom go in for agriculture. Was Ma Huan talking about these same fishing communities? Where men pick their way through the surf like great cranes in search of prey, as they have for hundreds of years.
So I get several weeks to cruise the coastline, and of course I love Vietnam very much. It's where my daughter is from. And I get to see scenes like this. This is the Mekong Delta. It's the biggest floating market in the world. I'm shooting from a bridge, and I get all these boats. What can I say? I'm back in the days of Zheng He, looking at a scene with nothing of, again, of this century. Another favorite picture of Vietnam that I shot from a military helicopter. This is the same scene down below when I was of this marketplace. I came here, I saw the possibilities, all these canals radiating out from the center of the city, and I thought, wow, what it would look like if it was up high and could see that, because the nature of this part of Vietnam is just like one big sponge. There are no roads. Well, there are roads, but there are mostly canals, and I got up there in the helicopter and I saw this scene. This really tells the story of the Mekong Delta in Vietnam. Okay, I'm here in a marigold farm. It's a very graphic picture. I actually got up on, I can't remember, I think I got a ladder and got up high over this marigold farm to show this very clever way the Vietnamese water their plants, and they build these racks right over the water. The flowers are in pots, and they can dip down, take the water, and put it right on top of the plants, and of course whatever is extra goes right back into the river running underneath it. And it says something about the Vietnamese because they love flowers. Everywhere you go in Vietnam, you always find flowers. Here's an example of camera at the ready. When I'm traveling, my eyes are always scanning, looking for the next picture. My cameras are at my side. Either I'm carrying them or one is in my hands. I'm searching for something to catch my eye, and suddenly out of the corner of my eye I see this guy coming down, standing on his water buffalo. I call this water buffalo surfing. And I was there to grab this picture, which is pretty funny. You can't help but laugh when you see it. Monkey bridges. Now, as you can see, it takes the dexterity of a monkey in order to traverse one of these bridges, and I waited a long time to get this picture because I needed people on the bridge as well as under the bridge to make it come to life. So I waited till I had these boats coming towards me and kids coming home from school crossing the bridge. I shot it backlit, and the thought comes to me, what must it have been like to be an American soldier there and having to climb over one of those things in full gear? Must have been really tough, horrible place to be fighting, considering that on both sides of this creek there's plenty of places to hide.
My journey soon takes me further south to the island of Java, Indonesia. Here in the port of Gresik, I decide to come ashore. It's the only way I can reach one of the most amazing sights that Zheng He probably witnessed in the early stages of his journey.
Eerie, bleak, timeless. The crater of Zheng volcano.
Nothing seems to have changed here for centuries. These men still pry the sulfur out by hand in toxic fumes that are almost unbearable. In his journal, Ma Huan described this scene.
The mountains produce sulfur, which comes from the inside of caves. Plants and trees will not grow on these mountains. The earth and rocks are all a bright color.
These loads of sulfur can be up to 100 kilograms. That's more than their own body weight. With all this smoke and the yellow sulfur and this incredible scenery, it doesn't get any better than this for a photographer.
And then we go to Indonesia. I like this picture for its energy. These kids are having a great time. They're on the beach, and of course, so am I. By backlighting, I've turned this heavy surf into this powerful flow of water. And by backlighting, the splashing of the kids is highlighted, so you can see this wonderful backlit foam as these kids are running through the surf. There's so much energy there. Now here's a favorite picture of mine. I'm at the Saifuddin Mosque, the main mosque, one of the most expensive ever built in the world. Of course, Brunei is the world's richest country because of its oil wealth. And I was here photographing a morning service. I forgot what day it was. Maybe it was Friday, maybe it was Sunday. It doesn't matter. The point is that this kid with his dad is learning how to pray. And I thought of my own kid, or I thought of Zheng He, how he must have learned from his father the same way on how to properly pray to Muhammad. And this is the ultimate praying picture for me. Layer upon layer of people focused in on the kid and his father, slightly looking up to observe how it's being done. And here's a picture of that same mosque, this time a landscape. There were fires burning in the area, and it filled the air with a very heavy smoke. And as the sun came up, it turned that sky to this pink glow. And that dome of this mosque is made of gold leaf, which is why it's one of the most expensive buildings ever built. And the glow off of that mixed into this pink sky with the blue water, it's just a wonderful collection of colors.
I leave Indonesia, as the treasure fleet did, by heading up through the Malacca Strait, one of the most treacherous waterways in the world. Maybe it was here that the fleet was caught in a violent storm.
Terrified that underwater dragons would bring the great ships down, the crew prayed to their goddess, Tianfei. According to Ma Huan, suddenly there was a magic lantern in the mast, and the danger was becalmed. For Zheng He, this was a sign that his fleet was under divine protection. Zheng He set up a number of strategic trading posts, which would lead to one of his greatest legacies, the founding of the overseas Chinese, the largest of which is in Malacca on the west coast of Malaysia. Legend has it that the Ming Emperor gifted a princess to Malacca's local sultan and 500 Chinese maidens, who intermarried with local men. Their descendants are said to be buried here on this hill called Bukit China, the biggest Chinese graveyard outside China. But Zheng He's legacy is very much alive. These men will take part in a Hindu festival. It's one of the most extreme religious practices in the world. This ritual is from India, but here in Malacca, it's practiced by ethnic Chinese.
For Aaron, like the others, piercing himself is an expression of devotion. By piercing his body, he thanks the gods for favors granted. Looking at all the faces, this is a powerful, if not unusual, blending of cultures.
From Malacca, the treasure fleet enters the vast open waters of the ocean as it heads toward its destination, the riches of the Indian Malabar coast.
The achievement of moving 300 boats and 28,000 men around the Indian Ocean basin was extraordinary. They were navigating by the stars. The only time calculation they had was a candle, and they were measuring the speed of the boat by dropping a stick off the bow, and as it passed, they would recite a rhyme. These were extremely crude navigational tools, and yet they managed to get from point to point in the Indian Ocean basin with extreme accuracy.
According to legend, this place was so beautiful it was God's compensation to Adam and Eve for the loss of paradise. But the island was poisoned by centuries of turmoil. Sri Lanka.
I begin my journey to find out what happened here by heading to Sri Lanka's towering religious icon, Adam's Peak. At the center of this island, it stands like a beacon of inspiration and hope. Pilgrims from all over, old and infirm, all make the brutal ascent to its summit. Almost there. We're here, the top of Adam's Peak for sunrise. Every explorer from Marco Polo to Ibn Battuta has been up here, and we're here because Zheng He talks about this sacred mountain in the clouds.
Adam's Peak is a place of worship for Hindus, Buddhists, and even Christians. There are no tensions here, just shrines, worshippers, and a stunning view. But in the forests down below, ethnic groups have been battling each other for generations. Keen to establish peace, Zheng He presents a gift to the local Buddhist chief, a tablet written in 3 languages, Chinese, Tamil, and Persian.
The Chinese were extremely respectful of all the religions that they encountered on their voyages, as exemplified by the wonderful triptych in Ceylon to all of the gods of the islands, to Buddha, to Allah, and to the Hindu gods. And very carefully articulated in the tablet is equal gifts for all. All got exactly the same. The Chinese had none of the religious vigor of Western exploration.
This was an offering of peace to an island at war.
incredibly more advanced scientifically, culturally, and economically. It amounted for by far the largest share of the world economy. Maybe the best measure of China's sophistication was that it was not until World War I that Europe and the West were finally able to put together a fleet as sophisticated as China had in the early 15th century.
I love this picture. It's unusual because it's in the snow. This is the Forbidden City. I've been here many times. It was the first time I actually saw it under snow. And thanks to jet lag, I had arrived the day before, and thanks to jet lag, I was up early, like 4 o'clock. I looked out my window, it was snowing. Jumped into a taxi, went to Coal Hill, which is, they call it Coal Hill. It's the highest point of Beijing, actually. And I ran through the snow, literally, to the top of this hill to get this picture. And from the top, I'm looking over the Forbidden City. The red of these city gates pops out of this picture. And also I'm helped by the fact that this is snow. This is what normally would be white sky. It'd be blown out because the contrast between what's here and what's here generally is too great, so that usually when you're going to point at a subject with this much sky, it's going to be white, and this is going to be well exposed. Well, the point is, the fact of the matter is that there is snow here, which is white. And therefore, in exposing for white snow, this is darken the sky. And I have this very nice detail framed in the pavilion up on top of the hill. So I have this rich, textured sky with snow here on the bottom, and I couldn't have gotten it in anything but this kind of snow condition.
From China, we've traveled through the South China Sea and across the Great Indian Ocean. Beyond Sri Lanka, like Zheng He, we turn north. The promise of exotic spice has always been a lure for adventurers. And somewhere along this coast, we'll find that precious commodity all traders sought. In those days, it was known as black gold.
Malabar pepper. I think it's the most famous pepper in the world because its history goes back the furthest.
Yeah, it's got a name and it still commands a huge premium in the market.
I meet up with Arun Ramakrishnan, whose family has been trading pepper for generations. What's special about Malabar pepper?
Well, it's got a special aroma. It's what lends it its flavor.
I'm at a pepper go down in Calicut, and this is the reason why Zheng He stopped here on all of his voyages. He was coming to buy the black gold pepper. This was the most precious of all the trading goods that Zheng He came in search of. What they're doing here is pushing the pepper through little holes, and that's what we're talking about grading, because the big stuff, only the biggest peppercorns will be left in this tray after this process. So, Arun, so this is the pepper grading going on over here with these women. What's going on over there?
There you have a buyer and a seller. You have the broker in between. So they'll negotiate the price under the handkerchief. I think you hold two, that's 200.
Right.
Or 300.
Right.
Or maybe I think this is 500.
Right. You know anything about the history? Do you think it might go back to Zheng He days when
well-
Arabs and Chinese and Indians were trading and maybe didn't speak the same language?
It could well be, because we sit in one room and we don't even have to speak.
Right, right.
You can just trade and without having to speak at all. You can
Great
just say
system.
yes, no.
Wonderful.
It's enough to just shake your head.
In the nearby port of Cochin, local Suresh Moni reveals why the Malabar coast was such a stable trading partner for Zheng He and the Chinese in the 15th century.
Suresh, Zheng He stopped here on all 7 of his voyages. It was almost like a second home to him.
Here.
Ma Huan mentions that the people were very prosperous and happy. The Indian people here got along very well together. Now, why was that?
This has been a place in India or Malabar coast where the people actually have a very high religious harmony, in fact. We got Christians, Muslims and Hindus all over here. They live together, they work together.
All these different religions, and yet everybody got along well together.
Oh yes, of course. For example, you can see the mosque just behind us and the Christian church further down. And there's also a Hindu temple on the other side of the road.
One item to be found up in these trees is surprisingly useful. We're at a coconut processing factory. Here we've got the husk. This is from what the core comes from. Got a couple of guys unloading boats over here. Let's see what it looks like. Ma Huan describes at least 10 uses for the coconut. You can drink it, you can eat it, you can use the oil for cooking. The shell is good for cups and bowls. The tree is good for building houses, and the leaves for roofing those houses. But most important of all, it's the fiber that's made into rope and used for shipbuilding. This is unbelievable. It's probably the biggest wooden ship anyone's ever likely to see in the 21st century. Yet the great treasure ships were more than double this size.
But size alone can't guarantee the survival of these giants. Forces at home are already conspiring against them. If the treasure fleet were to be halted, it would bring China's trade with the outside world to an end. But that isn't all that's at stake. An unprecedented period of cultural exchange is threatened with extinction. It's said that China's most famous martial art, Kung Fu, originated in India.
In Kerala, Sunil Kumar's family has practiced the traditional South Indian martial art of Kalari for generations. Well, tell me a little bit about what you know best. Kalari Payat.
Historians believe this is the mother of all martial art forms.
Kalari was practiced by Buddhist monks and Hindu saints as a means of protection. In the 6th century, an Indian monk introduced this ancient art form to the Shaolin Temple in China. That, many believe, was the birth of Kung Fu. And just like Kung Fu, Kalari takes its movement from the animals. Tell me about the movements of Kalari as being related to
Kalari,
animals.
we are doing 8 postures. Elephant posture is for getting the strength in the body. There is some special measurement for that, and go and stay like that. snake posture. That is for getting the flexibility. Only the snake can move forward and backward wherever they need to bend.
What about the leaping?
One we are adopted from the fish and also from the cat.
Kung Fu is one of China's most famous exports. Who would have thought that it actually came from India? Finally, we leave India and follow the treasure fleet west. Like Zheng He, we set out across the Arabian Sea toward the coast of modern-day Yemen.
Southern Yemen on the Red Sea, and to my right up north is Mecca, and to my left down south is Africa. There was a lot of trade going on here between Arabs and Africans and Indians, as well as the Chinese, when Zheng He arrived 600 years ago. The interesting thing about this Yemen coastline is this mix of cultures. You got a mosque over there, and you got an African village behind me. And that's just the way it was, even back in Zheng He's day.
If the treasure fleet was after exotic goods, this was one of the best places to find them, and still is today.
We're in Hodeidah, the biggest fishing port on the Red Sea. Sharks everywhere. I've seen the one in Tsukiji, and it doesn't even come near comparing in size, at least for the sharks. They're tossing tons of sharks out of the boats. The big ones can't even be lifted by one person. We've seen all kinds, from hammerheads to threshers. You can't help but feel a little sorry for the sharks, especially when you're watching them getting their fins cut off. And obviously the fins are what the Chinese are interested in, and all of that will be heading to China for shark fin soup. Bargaining and noise, and everybody's excited. It looks like they're fighting when they're bargaining. I have no idea what they're saying, but obviously those catches are worth a lot, and everybody wants a piece of the action. This has got to be the mother of all shark markets.
It's possible that Zheng He loaded his ships with sharks from markets like this. But for him, the real prize lay further inland.
Well, from Yemen and Oman, I think Zheng He is mainly looking for frankincense and myrrh. They used it as incense, as the Arabs do, and they also use it as a form of medicine.
This and Somalia are the only spots in the world where it comes from.
It comes from the interior, deep into the most inhospitable parts of the globe. It was brought to the coastlines by long trains, caravans of camels.
Today, frankincense and myrrh can be found here on the back streets of Yemen's ancient capital, Sana'a. Frankincense.
That's frankincense, Mike.
It smells great. Tell me about it.
Yeah, frankincense is that they collect it from the bark of the trees, nearly in Hadramaut, normally in Hadramaut and the borders of Oman, which is called the Far area. And they make a hole in the tree, and then the second day they come together all this from the tree itself, from the bark, and they sell it in kilograms or also in grams as well. There are different sorts of myrrh, incense, and frankincense.
Myrrh?
That's myrrh here.
And this comes from the same place.
From the same place, but different trees. Different trees.
Right. So this is the sap from the tree.
That's the sap from the tree, and that's from the bark.
So is this? Oh, this is from the bark.
That's from the bark.
Oh,
that's
why
right.
not?
That's right.
Has a nice smell.
Well, they burn it up actually. They burn it up on coal, charcoal, and then it becomes a very nice incense.
There's another commodity that you can spot almost everywhere you go. The telltale sign is bulging cheeks. Some say the effect of chewing this leafy narcotic is equal to 6 double espressos. It's called khat. I just had to try some.
Khat is a stimulant which people here chew in the afternoon. Normally after they have the lunch, they chew it starting from 2 o'clock to about 6 o'clock in the evening.
It's very bitter.
It's bitter in taste, but the people are very used to it. It keeps them alert, more stimulant.
So is this going to give me more energy?
Oh, certainly it does. And if you get used to it, you can get addicted as well.
Really? Is it stronger than coffee?
Well, it's a bit stronger than coffee, and stronger than tea as well.
Okay. Well, I want to see what it does. How much do I have to chew?
Well, you got to chew some of this khat for about 2 or 3 hours. Every day.
In order to feel the effects, I have to do 2 or 3 hours?
You have to get used to it.
How come you're not chewing?
I always chew very, very little sometimes, not that much. But I love it.
I don't know if I could do this for 2 hours. Love it or loathe it, in Yemen, khat is a national obsession. It's been around for 700 years, so who knows? Perhaps even Zheng He could have tried it.
Trading for frankincense and myrrh brought Zheng He's expeditions repeatedly to the Middle East. But he may have had more personal reasons: to follow his faith in the footsteps of his father.
We're in Jibla, going to Queen Arawa's mosque, built in the 11th century as a part of a university to teach Islam. You know, this is one of the most beautiful mosques I've seen yet in Yemen. It's the architecture with those wonderful arches and columns. The weather was just perfect today, the sun's shining, bouncing off that white tile in the courtyard. Most of all, there are all those worshipers praying and reading the Quran. And in a country where it's hard to actually even get in a mosque, it's a very unusual situation. You know, Zheng He, as a Muslim, must have been dying to get to Mecca. His father made the pilgrimage before he was born.
And his family were Muslims who came from Central Asia. Now, Zheng He, when he came here to Yemen, may have worshipped in an ancient mosque like this one.
Whether he made it to Mecca or not is another story.
The treasure fleet has made 6 legendary voyages. forged diplomatic relations with dozens of rulers and kings, made an encyclopedic study across 10,000 miles of ocean in 67 overseas states. We've seen all the major countries and places where the treasure fleets traveled. But there is one final location: Africa.
We're arriving in Lamu, the biggest Arab dhow left in the Indian Ocean, just as Zheng He would have seen it from the deck of a 400-foot treasure ship. And it just looks beautiful.
We're here to solve one of the greatest mysteries of the treasure fleet. Legend has it, a shipwreck left a number of Zheng He's sailors on an island off Africa's Swahili coast. After marrying local women, they created a community of their own, known today as the Washanga part of the Famau clan. Perhaps Zheng He's crew settled on this coast more than 80 years before Vasco da Gama. But can we find evidence that the legend is real?
I'm heading to Pate Island with Badi, who promises he can introduce me to a surviving member of the Famau. So, how long have you known Mrs. Baraka?
For quite some time, actually.
Does she really look Chinese, Badi?
Oh, yes.
Really? I'm really looking forward to meeting her and taking her picture.
You'll see her, definitely.
It's definitely worth the wait. Locals say there are fewer than 100 Famau scattered on different islands.
Baraka. Mike. No, Mike, Mama Baraka.
Mrs. Baraka, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. So, Badi, if you could ask Mrs. Baraka a few questions. Could I ask her how long has she lived here in the village?
Umeishi katika kijiji kwa miaka mingapi? Kwa muda gani? She had been here since she was born.
What must have that been like at age 20 to be told that your great-great-great-great-great-grandfather or whatever was Chinese?
Kwambia huyu bana, ulijuaje kihakika katika umri ule wa miaka 20 kwamba wewe ni Mchina? Ulipata kutoka kwa nani haswa?
Mbali na mashanjini wakena hama Machina. Kwamba ili kabila yetu hao Machina na wale jamaa zetu wote wakawa huambiwa kwamba sampuli ya Machina. Waliamba kwamba chosiana nao.
Among the older generation, like the grandfathers, the great-grandmothers and great-grands, all knew that their ancestry really belonged to that Chinese shipwrecked people. And that was handed over from one generation to the other until it reached her.
She shows me a piece of pottery she thinks was brought here on the treasure fleets. Was that the only piece? Could I see? Well, I'm no expert. Looks like the real thing to me.
It looks like.
The nearby Famau graveyard looks very familiar. These Chinese-style graves even have Ming pottery for decoration. It's hard to tell from her face alone that Mrs. Baraka's origins are Chinese. but her story certainly seems convincing. For generations, the Famao have also passed down an unusual tale.
Africa was, of course, Zheng He's El Dorado. It's a great mystery as to how these very remote people who speak no English, who of course read no Chinese, they had such amazingly specific details that the emissary from the Emperor of China had come to Malindi and that the King of Malindi had given them 2 giraffes. One of the giraffes had died on the way back to China. Were they truly descended from shipwrecked Chinese sailors? How did they acquire this knowledge?
As Judi's body is laid to rest, so with it is his vision for China as a global superpower. His expansionist projects and severe famine had seriously depleted the imperial treasury. Within a year, Confucian influence begins to dominate.
Confucian philosophy, I think, stressed that the empire should be self-sufficient, that trade was really unnecessary. You didn't want foreigners interfering in your country. The son should not go abroad because he couldn't attend to the filial obligations of his ancestors. Trade was base and demeaning and not well respected by the Confucians.
Arguably, the worst foreign policy blunder that any country has ever made was China's decision in the 1400s to abandon Zheng He's explorations and instead to close the country, to turn inward. And the result was that China's trade vanished, its economy began to diminish, and that it found itself on a downward escalator, which it found itself impossible to get off of.
Well, the legacy of Zheng He, well, first of all, Zheng He was a very modern man. He lived at the same time as, say, as the Spanish Inquisition. There were a lot of people around the world being killed because they worshiped a different god. They were a minority. And here we have a guy who is a minority, is a Muslim living in China, and a eunuch, because in spite of all this, or maybe because of it, he has this empathy for the common person, the poor, the minority peoples, the people who are of different race and religion, and goes around the world doing tribute trade, meaning bringing all the best from China and trading for lesser items around the world. But he's basically out there to on a kind of a diplomatic mission to show the world the greatness of China. And he brings with it a vision of equality.
Why did China not come to dominate the world? The first reason is, in a sense, they weren't greedy enough. China was then about all kinds of things. It was about filial piety, about honor, about Confucianism. The second reason, I think, is kind of a culture of complacency. They were inward-looking in a way that I'm afraid the West has become today. And as a result, there was a lot of opposition to the idea of going abroad. When the Confucians came to wrest control from the eunuchs and make these catastrophic mistakes, then they condemned the entire Chinese people for the next 500 years.
The treasure fleet may have disappeared, but Zheng He's legacy lives on in communities all over the world, linking diverse cultures and religions. In Indonesia, Buddhists worship him as a god. While these young Muslims learn to read from a Quran in a mosque dedicated to his name. His preaching of religious tolerance is still a lesson for us today. Perhaps his greatest legacy may be the settling of Chinese communities abroad. The voyages of Zheng He enabled members of ancient Chinese villages like this one, home to a group called the Hakka, to leave China and seek their fortunes in Southeast Asia, India, the Middle East, and even Africa.
He doesn't conquer. He does not colonize. He goes on a trading mission to show the world the good of China, and for this reason, China should be really elevating this guy as a great hero, because if everybody's foreign policy was built on a person with this kind of modern outlook, where people should live in peace and be treated equally, then we might be on the way to living in a better place.